Hands up, who wants to die?
What's going to happen when these three phenomena, and every time I say that word, I'm 50 in January, and every time I say the word phenomena, I do the next bit of the Muppets theme tune silently in my head. I suppose it's progress in the context of maturity that I used to do it out loud. Phenomena, do-do-do-do-do. But I digress. Three phenomena due to collide on Monday, I think, on Monday morning, or Sunday at midnight. I forget technically the precise time. And I don't know what it is going to look like. It is simply a mystery. The three phenomena that are set to collide are, in no particular order, the app going off like nobody's business. Is it 3 weeks ago, 3 Mondays ago, or 4 Mondays ago? But I sat here at 2 minutes to 10, and all we had talked about that morning in the office was people being pinged. It was literally all we'd been talking. Was it a Friday? Actually, rather than... doesn't matter, does it? The point is, it was a Friday. It was a Friday, and it's Friday again today. I told you it was Groundhog Day. And because all we talked about that morning in the office was people getting pinged, people we knew, our children at school, our children's friends, cohorts, colleagues, people getting pinged to the left of me, pinged to the right of me. Onwards, pinging everywhere. And at 2 minutes to 10... shortly after 10 o'clock, while I was listening to the news bulletin, I thought, do you know what? I think this is actually more important than anything that is currently in the bulletin. Remember that when I decide what we're going to talk to each other about in the morning, I am not necessarily, by any stretch of the imagination, looking for the biggest story of the day. I mean, the single most important. If there was some objective measure for the importance of a story, we would not, for example, be largely confined to the domestic news agenda. Climate change would probably be our 10 o'clock topic every single day at the moment, in many ways, once COVID has moved along. But in the terms of what we talk about together, it just suddenly struck me, as it does occasionally, that what we are talking about together in real life, for want of a better phrase, is the single most important thing in front of us at the moment. So we went all in on the pinging app, and boom, switchboard went off like a firework display, and absolutely everybody, it seemed, listening to the programme, had a tale of isolating in circumstances that made little or no sense, businesses being brought to their knees by, already struggling with staff shortages because of the B word, which we'll try to get to 11 o'clock today without saying out loud, and the pinging app just ripping through their workforce like a dose of salts, and schools and colleges and all the rest of it. So that is phenomenon number one, okay, the pinging app. Phenomenon number two, I turn once again to the Times newspaper, where every day they print a little table of international data regarding coronavirus infections and the rest of it. There are days where I wonder whether I'm the only one who gets this edition of the Times. We seem some days to be some mornings to be the only people who pay attention to it. So, the tables. This is when I tell you that Germany has now administered 84.2 million jabs, while we have administered 81.4. So we can't even claim to have the fastest or the biggest rollout in Europe anymore. And then I turn the page and we look at the most new cases table, where I'm delighted to tell you we've been pushed back into second place in the entire world by Indonesia. We now have the second highest number of new cases. Yesterday we were, of course, in the world beating top spot. So the figure today is 48,553 new cases. That is phenomenon number two. So you've got your pinging app coming in from the left. You've got your second highest number of new cases in the world coming in from the right. What is the third point of the triangle? The third point of the triangle is Monday, which, if you were to turn from the Times to another Rupert Murdoch-owned newspaper, namely The Sun, you would see that the dread phrase Freedom Day is still in circulation. And in many ways, it is an accurate phrase, albeit that it doesn't really apply in Scotland or in Wales, and somewhat less so in Northern Ireland. In England, it will be up to you as a business owner or as an individual, a member of the public or a shopkeeper, a nightclub owner or indeed a bus driver. It will be effectively up to you to implement what ceases to be rules and instead becomes guidance. And the fact that people are still using Freedom Day, and the fact that hashtag It's Over started trending on Twitter pretty much the moment that July the 19th was confirmed as the day on which all restrictions were lifted, means that I expect things to change quite markedly on Monday. I hope they don't, in the context of our behaviour, your behaviour, my behaviour. I suspect that the massive majority of us will just continue to be careful. You want to sort of dip a toe back into circulation. You want to move up one gear from where we currently are, but the government is effectively allowing you, and I think encouraging you, although that would be harder to prove, it's certainly allowing you to move up 5 gears in one go. That is phenomenon number 3. So 3 points of a triangle, 3 vehicles heading towards each other at breakneck speed, due to collide on Monday morning. The infection rate, second highest in the world. The pinging app, I mean, millions of people now being taken out of circulation, whether they have the virus or not. In fact, I mean, crucially, of course, for this conversation, millions of people who do not have the virus being taken out of circulation. And Freedom Day. What's going to happen when those 3 things collide? And if you're of a more upbeat disposition, well, no, I'm very upbeat. What's the word I want? If you are a bit more... Right, look, if your glasses have got rose-tinted lenses in them, if you are, for whatever reason it may be, obviously if it's a sort of slavish devotion to Boris Johnson's ridiculous regime, then you're probably going to struggle to persuade many of us to join you in cloud cuckoo land. But if you have some reasonable basis for thinking, no, I mean, it sounds bad, Jimbo. Sounds pretty messy. I can see why you're worrying, old pal, old bean, old boy. But listen, sit yourself down, pour some tea into your enormous mug, and pay attention. Things are not going to be that bad because ... You will go to the front of the queue today. Well, or no, we'll do it all very equally on the Great British Radio Show. All views are welcome. You can even take a knee if you want. 0345 60 60973 is the number that you need. Those are the 3 phenomena that are due to collide at breakneck speed come Monday morning. The next time we convene together, the next time I have the pleasure of hearing your voice, will be when those 3 things have collided. And I want to know what you think is going to happen. The other thing I want to know is what the government thinks is going to happen, because it's really, really hard to work out, isn't it? And I wonder whether we can even talk in terms of government, because we had, I think, Nadeem Zahawi contradicting the Prime Minister within 24 hours of the Prime Minister pronouncing on the subject. So what do we even mean by government in the context of what... I've got to stop saying in the context of. I've said it about 38 times already this morning. What do we even mean by the word government when we talk about what the government is expecting / hoping to happen next week? And those words send a bit of a shiver down my spine as well. We're not talking about 10 years hence. It's not like J-Dog, is it? Talking about when the benefits of the B word are going to kick in 50 years' time. This is next week. Today is Friday. The collision occurs on Monday. What is going to happen? And I do this almost every day at the moment, and the reason I do it almost every day is twofold. Number one, I'm absolutely fascinated to know what this looks like from where you're sitting. I know roughly what it looks like from where I'm sitting, although I still struggle some days to believe the sheer scale of the incompetence and catastrophe unfolding in front of us, and I still cling to the notion that just because they got everything wrong yesterday doesn't mean they'll get everything wrong tomorrow. But on Monday, these 3 factors smash into each other, and they may sort of merge to create a rosy new dawn, a warm and welcoming new reality, or we may have yet another disaster on our hands. I mean, a nightmare of unfathomable proportions, because you've got the app ripping businesses to pieces, whether the people being pinged have got COVID or not. You've got the infection rate and the attendant rise in hospitalisations and deaths, although a fraction of what it would be without the vaccines. It's still going up at a rate of knots. No real sense of the plateau being on the horizon, although it has to be there somewhere. And then you've got so-called Freedom Day, a stupid phrase, an absolutely idiotic, an imbecilic phrase from the moment it was first coined, because it creates in the minds of people who are, of course, being told to use their personal responsibility to police the biggest public health crisis of all time, people essentially being told, all bets are off, you get out there, you fill your boots. You can have your face-licking festival on Monday without running the risk of anybody having their collar felt while they're licking each other's faces. I won't say that again either today. I put Keith right off his dinner yesterday. I still feel a little bad about it during Mystery Hour. And there it is. So let's get the phone lines open. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Pick apart my prediction that there is an epic collision on the horizon come Monday morning. You'll be made particularly welcome. 0345 6060 973. And if you can, have a little look in your crystal ball. And obviously this invitation is particularly extended to people in the medical profession, I guess, first and foremost, but also to business people, because you'll all have different angles depending on which bit of the collision concerns you most, the app, the Freedom Day, or the infections. And just have a go at predicting what's going to happen, and also at explaining what you think the government is expecting to happen. Because I can't quite see how anybody could look at the current situation and feel anything but, and I shall use a very mild word here, trepidation. Okay? Trepidation. What do you see in your crystal ball? And what do you think Boris Johnson sees in his? What is going to happen when the infection rate, the app, and maybe there's a defence of the app, but of course it's the people being pinged who have to self-isolate or are self-isolating despite not being infected, and the so-called Freedom Day, when they all collide on Monday. And I will take any answer you've got, including personal perspectives. What's going to happen to your pub? What's going to happen to your business? What's going to happen to your shop? What's going to happen to your factory, to your nightclub? 0345 6060 973. And what do you think the plan is? What do you think the government is expecting, hoping to occur when this collision of phenomena occurs on Monday? Richard is in Harrow. Richard, take it away.
Hi, James. First time caller.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, my personal opinion is that I firmly believe the government is prolonging the pandemic.
Really?
Yeah. We've had Brexit, and for those of us that pay attention...
I was going to try not to say that until 11 o'clock. We weren't going to mention it until at least 11 o'clock today. But here we are. Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, I think for those of us that pay attention, we can see the country's just coming almost to a standstill with the drop in trade with Europe, the lorry drivers' problem, the fishing industry on its knees, and the steel industry soon to be. But I think it suits the government, because everybody seems to be buying the ticket that it's the pandemic that's causing all these problems. And I think it suits the government just to keep it going.
Really?
We've already had Rees-Mogg saying that it's going to take years. Was it 50 years he mentioned?
Up to 50 years, I think. I mean, it's hard to remember what he said. It goes in one ear and out the other.
I think this government was elected on the ticket of getting Brexit done.
Yes.
Brexit isn't done properly yet, and they need to confuse us to get it done.
I mean, this is an incredibly bleak analysis. Because I mean, not only is it incredibly bleak, it's also quite, oddly enough, it's also quite generous, because it posits the notion that they actually have got a plan and that all this is happening according to a plan, rather than it being just a sort of almighty skip-fire over which they exercise no control whatsoever. So you are suggesting that for example, the decision not to close the travel corridor from India and to let in the Johnson variant, 20,000 people potentially with the Johnson variant, you're suggesting that was a deliberate ruse to... No. Well, go on then. What then? Which bits are deliberate? Which bits are deliberate?
I think just keeping the pandemic going, keeping the press reporting on the pandemic. Now, the business with India, that was Brexit related, because we needed a trade deal with India.
Yes, of course.
So it's not to do with people's health. That comes secondary. You've got somebody in charge who's used to, we call him a murderer, call him a psychopath, whatever. He's heard it all before, and it's water off a duck's back to him.
Yes, no,
His raison d'etre is getting Brexit done. And if there's a commotion now, there will be a lot of problems. People will be looking to turn back. But a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, it's even people...
So the longer the
Brexit
coronavirus goes on for, the more camouflage is provided for the unravelling of Brexit. And so you would then... So which bits are deliberate? In the context of Monday morning's collision, infection rates are going through the roof. The app is, it would appear, completely out of control. And on Monday, what rules are currently in place, in England at least, are every single one of them is lifted. They no longer are rules. They simply become guidance rather than requirements. And you think that is deliberately designed to send us plummeting back down the coronavirus hole?
I do, yes.
Okay.
I do.
No,
Maybe not to the scale that we've had before, but certainly it has to keep going. There has to be a...
And then another lockdown? And then another lockdown?
Maybe so. And then when the trade drops further because of Brexit, they can say, well, we've got the pandemic.
Well, I mean, I have asked a question which has created a space. And, of course, in the absence of clarity and leadership, as we've been saying since March 2020, you don't get to control what moves into the space if there's no clarity and leadership. And at the moment, Richard's suggestion is that it is I mean, if it is a plan, it's not as disgusting as it would have been in the pre-vaccine scenario, is it? I mean, that the idea of letting it rip through the nation, not actually to create herd immunity by building up antibodies among people who've been infected, which was perhaps the earliest of plans, but instead to actually continue camouflaging the catastrophe of Brexit, which is, of course, embodied not just in Boris Johnson's premiership, but in Boris Johnson himself. So it's on the list. It's a theory. If you don't like it, do a better job on 03456060973. 60973. What happens on Monday, in your view? And what is the government hoping / expecting to happen on Monday when these three phenomena collide? The infection rate, second highest in the world today, first in the world yesterday. The app pinging left, right and centre all over the shop, ripping workforces apart, isolating people who are clearly not infected but still have to abide by the rules of self-isolation. For good or for ill, you might want to defend that. I can see a strong case for defending that in the absence of the other two problems. And the third, which is this ludicrous phrase, Freedom Day. 10:24 is the time. Alex is in Wasdale, is it, in Cumbria? Alex, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Thanks for taking my call.
You're most welcome.
It's great to finally speak to you. I listen to your podcast every day, but I listen to it a day behind.
Why?
Because I'm on the farm. Well, because I'm on the farm, there's no signal.
Oh,
so
fair enough.
To the download.
Oh, that's quite
Today
interesting.
I've got a chance to actually catch you and give you a call.
Well, it's a treat for me as well. But, of course, listening to it a day behind in the current climate, probably you don't notice. You might as well be listening to yesterday's show and the day before and the day before.
Last year's, couldn't I, really?
It's July 2020 and Alex is on the line from Cumbria. Alex, what would you like to say?
Well, here in Cumbria, I work with my family. We have a farm, which I basically do. And then there's also a campsite and a farm shop. So obviously this whole COVID-19 has been a right palaver for the last 18 months. Everything's been up in the air, cancelling bookings, opening, closing, etc.
One step forward, two steps back. It must have been incredibly difficult for you all.
Well, yeah, it has been. Fortunately, I just look after sheep and cows most of the time, so they don't complain.
No.
I was basically calling because here we're having the same problem that you're mentioning across the country, like people getting pinged, workers can't come in, etc., etc. But what I kind of think and I kind of hope is that the government's making the right decision.
Go on.
Basing their thoughts on the science. Well, obviously it's been proven, disproven.
Yes.
Of herd immunity, and hoping that people will get the virus now, build up some kind of resistance to it before the winter strikes, when it really does cause a problem. Yes,
I mean that is perhaps the most optimistic of readings, which is slightly...
Yeah, well, I'm an eternal optimist, James.
Well, you have to be if you're a farmer in the current climate, Alex, I suspect.
Well, it's a fairly good climate for us, contrary to what you believe.
Oh, good.
I probably have fairly... Well, I listen to your show, I read The Guardian, etc., every day. However, I really subscribe to Nick Ferrari's show and The Telegraph.
But that's absolutely great. All welcome here. You certainly won't be cancelled. You can even take a knee if you want without losing your job or having the whole station issue an apology and complain about breaching our standards. But the problem is that Sage, most of the scientists worry that the vaccination rate is currently not as high as it needs to be for this tactic to work. My view is that this tactic would work if we hadn't let in the Johnson variant, you see. That is the worry.
I don't think that it's quite fair to call it the Johnson variant. It's not on to call it the Chinese version of that variant, apparently.
You can if you want, Alex. Free speech all round, mate. I don't know who's been brainwashing you into thinking differently. So the scientists say...
and hope the Delta Airlines don't get upset.
The scientists say we need to have more people vaccinated for the plan that you've just described to have the best chance of succeeding. That is a worry. But I will join in your optimism. Hopefully the scientists are wrong and Johnson is right.
Well, I'm not saying that they're wrong or that he's right. However, we are in uncharted waters that no one really knows yet. And I mean, for how long can you keep asking businesses to be closed? And
that is the killer question. That is the killer question. What we haven't done really is well, you have actually, in the context of what is going to happen on Monday. Everything is going to get a lot worse for a while in the hope of things getting better at the end of that while. And I don't think anybody would not want things to get better. I guess the question is how much worse they're going to get and for how long. I think he's right, actually, in many ways. But, of course, it's going to reach ears very differently. If you're particularly clinically vulnerable at the moment, you're probably absolutely terrified of the idea that that is the plan. But listening to Sajid Javid in particular talk quite blithely about 100,000 cases a day, perhaps, it's... I would suggest, if you were going to put money on Alex or Richard, the earlier caller, suggesting that it's all a plan to camouflage the catastrophe of Brexit, I would probably put my money on Alex's reading of the situation, which leads us neatly back to Lord Farquaad, of course, the much maligned star of Shrek. Some people are going to die, but that is a price I am willing to pay. I don't know whether that's what you want from your leaders, but that, I think, under Alex's reading, which I'm currently minded to agree with, that is what you're going to get. If you don't like what Alex has said, if you don't like what Richard has said, if you don't like what I have said, then provide your alternative on 0345 6060 973. The infection rate, the app, Freedom Day. On Monday, boom, they all collide. Possibly it'll be one of those explosions that create something better than what went before. We'll end up with something that is somehow superior to the sum of its parts. But if the best case scenario is the idea that everything is going to get a lot worse for a while in the hope of things getting better at the end of it, then I think perhaps the Prime Minister should be explaining that a little bit more clearly, instead of announcing something on a Sunday that is contradicted by his own cabinet on a Monday, or indeed calling upon you to exercise personal responsibility as a citizen of a country where just 6 short days ago a young man inserted a firework up his bottom in the middle of London's Leicester Square while his mate lit it. What's it going to be like? 2 strong theories so far. Oddly, I lean towards the one that is arguably more generous towards the current clown car in Downing Street. The idea that they are just going to let it run through the unvaccinated parts of the population, close their eyes perhaps to the fact that about half of the people who are dying at the moment are double vaccinated, I think, and hope that some form of herd immunity is built up in that way. I mean, quite a few of you are suggesting I went a bit easy on the gentleman in Cumbria because of the variants. I mean, the fact that most virologists, in fact, I mean, one in New Zealand has gone on the record explicitly to say if you wanted to create an environment in which a new variant that is resistant to the vaccines we currently have will be created, then you would do exactly what the UK government, the English bit of the UK government, is currently doing. But fingers crossed. I mean, just because it could happen doesn't mean it will happen. Some people will die, but that is a price, as Lord Farquaad infamously said. CNN picked up on this right at the beginning of the pandemic. I saw the clip doing the rounds the other day, and I presumed it was from March of this year. It was from March of last year that the British government's policy appeared to be some people are going to die, but that is a price I'm willing to pay, which tallies very, very unpleasantly with what Dominic Cummings has claimed about Boris Johnson himself. And Dominic Cummings, of course, albeit that he's fast turning into a national joke, was in the room where it happened. 10:35 is the time. Sean is in Tooting. Sean, what do you reckon?
Hi, James. First time caller here. Thank you.
Welcome.
I feel like this is all kind of slightly going towards a ruse now, where we're going to have to go forward with this idea of July 19th because it's way too late for Boris Johnson to back out of this, and he's already seen enough pressure from his Tory backbenchers to basically go forward with this. And the media has had a massive role to play in dubbing it Freedom Day and basically walking us into this kind of disaster. And so we'll go forward with it. And then when things don't work out, he can finally walk back and say, well, you see, everything got so awful. Now it would be political suicide not to reimpose restrictions and have to basically bring us back into semi-lockdown just until, I don't know, next year or something.
So we cross our fingers and hope that the new variant, that there is no new vaccine-resistant variant. We enjoy the lifting of restrictions for as long as it lasts, and we will be staggered if they are not reintroduced at some point between now and Christmas.
Well, I mean, you can look at the Netherlands where
3 weeks.
They opened nightclubs and everything, and then within 3 weeks, cases spiraled up by like 500%. And we're basically walking into that same scenario right now where, the vaccine rollout has gone super well. But, I mean, if you consider the percentage of people, consider the percentage of people who are actually fully vaccinated within the country, it's only about 50% of the whole population, really.
Fully vaccinated.
They're not 100%.
Yeah,
and they're not 100% effective either. So
and Mark Rutte did something. I think Angela Merkel did something similar very, very early on in the coronavirus. Mark Rutte, the acting Prime Minister of the Netherlands, of course, came out. I think on Monday it may have been. Everything just blurs, doesn't it? After a while, Sean. It may have been.
Yes.
It may have been. I was like the lad listening to yesterday's podcast. I can fully imagine him thinking it's actually today's. But the Prime Minister of the Netherlands actually came out and said, sorry, we made a misjudgment, which I don't think Boris Johnson, despite having performed worse than pretty much any other leader on the planet, has never said, oops, we made a mistake. Ever, I don't think.
No, and he's never going to. You know, none of this is a mistake, and he'll blame anyone who sees anything as a mistake as just having complete hindsight vision, which is just nonsense, really. So everyone knows it's an issue right now.
Yeah, well, and almost all of the scientists seem to agree, but of course you'll always be able to find a newspaper columnist or perhaps a presenter on television stations that are now recording 0 viewers, according to the official figures, insisting that masks and muzzles and nappies and we need our freedom. But our freedom to do what? Our freedom to get sick? Our freedom to get pinged? Our freedom to incubate a new vaccine-resistant virus? So, as another, I guess we chalk that one up as a pessimistic but realistic worldview. Best case scenario, courtesy of Alex in Cumbria, is they're deliberately letting it rip through the 50% of the population potentially that is currently not fully vaccinated, plus, of course, the people who are vaccinated who will catch it and largely have much milder symptoms, but long COVID becomes a bigger factor, of course. The more people get COVID, the more people get long COVID. And some of the conversations about hospitals and the Johnson variant and organ damage are really scary, albeit that the numbers are objectively quite small. The price that we will pay, if that is the plan, is currently incalculable. And again, you have to hope it works, because it's your house that he's put on the table. It's your house that he's betting on 2 nines against the virus, which so far has had a full house on every hand. That's the mad bit about it. This is the bit I hate saying to you every day, but I have to. It's my job to give you the truth. It's why our ratings have never hit 0, although one doesn't want to tempt fate. I have to give you the truth, and the truth is he's betting your house, your life, well, not your life as much as pre-vaccine, but he's betting your welfare on a pair of 9s. And you've got to hope he bluffs it, or you've got to hope that the cards go in his direction, because albeit you wouldn't bet your house on a pair of 9s, he's the one who's got the keys. 10:40 is the time. Effa is in Hawley. Effa, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
I'm absolutely terrified.
Oh.
I mean, I'm going back into isolation on Monday with my family.
Are you?
Yes.
Deliberately? Do you...
I'm double jabbed.
Right.
My husband's double jabbed, and we have a 4-year-old. But I'm terrified that I'm going to end up as one of the statistics.
Well, I mean, in percentage terms, it is highly unlikely. This is where, in the past, I would point out that you're more likely to die from a coconut dropping on your head than you are to die in an aeroplane crash or something. Do you see what I mean? The percentage chances of you being one of the statistics at the worst end of the scale are really, really tiny.
Yeah, but I mean, the one thing that I do know from this government is that when they're doing things right, they never shut up about it. and you know, for ages, like, all I could hear is, you know, how amazing are we? Everyone's getting vaccinated.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden we're not the best at vaccinating people, so they're not talking about it anymore.
I'll give them a chance. They took a day off on Wednesday, but I suspect it'll be back in the hit parade next. Well,
but the other thing that they're not doing is sharing the statistics on how sick people that are double jabbed are getting, and how many people that are double jabbed are getting COVID.
well, they are sharing those statistics.
I haven't seen them.
Well, that's 'cause you're not
I've
looking
seen
hard
one in
enough.
the newspaper which said 47%
Yes.
of people that are vaccinated with one dose is in there with the double doses.
Right.
But what I want to know is, like, if you want to instill confidence in the country to get back to normal,
Yes.
I'm not going to say Freedom Day because it's not.
Madness.
Then what you need to do is provide the statistics
Yes.
and say, look, you know, if you're between the age of 12 and 24,
Yes.
which seem to be the population that are, you know, highest numbers at the moment,
Of infections.
then this is the percentage of people that are going to end up really sick, and this is the percentage of people that are likely to end up in hospital or worse.
And we want the long COVID numbers as well, of course,
And the
because
long COVID
everywhere
numbers,
you
of
go,
course.
people are talking about that, or everywhere you go.
Absolutely. And what does that look like in a 12 to 18-year-old, for example? They don't have the statistics on that. So I kind of feel like I'm going to put myself and my family in the tightest of bubble until I feel confident in
And
the
what would
data, until I
confidence?
see
What
the
would
data.
confidence look like? So you just want the numbers, and then you will make a calculation. So if you had the numbers
Absolutely.
now, you might actually decide not to go under on Monday.
Absolutely. If
Right.
I can make a calculated...
But that's
risk
personal
assessment, I hate to sound
responsibility.
like a safety officer. But if I can make a calculated,
Yeah.
you know, assessment of the data, then I will make a decision based on the risk that me and my family are willing to take.
So you don't currently feel that you have the information you need
No.
to take personal responsibility?
No, so I'm going to the extreme.
Yeah, you're going to, I think, excessively on the side of caution. But of course,
Yes.
for every person that does contract long COVID or, God forbid, die despite being vaccinated, that in a way validates your decision, because until you
Yes.
have the numbers to know better, you're not going to risk it.
No. And both myself and my husband's family live in Ireland and Scotland, respectively, and we haven't seen them since January 2020.
No.
And they're expected to come, and they're due to come and see us in August.
Right.
And I'm not going to do anything to risk seeing my family. And if that means that from now until the day we actually see them, we don't see anybody else, well, then that's what I'm going to do.
You do like them.
I love them.
Yeah, I was just checking, because, you know, so I wouldn't be much of a sacrifice if you couldn't bear the bones of them, would it? But,
No, it wouldn't. No,
but no, I take your
you-
point. I mean, I am not going to be anywhere near as careful as you, but I am not here to condemn you, because your explanation about needing the numbers is solid. I think they're available. I think you can find them. I haven't got them in front of me. I've got some numbers, but not the specific breakdown of... I mean, long COVID would be a prediction based upon what we know so far, but the number of infections and deaths that have occurred despite vaccination, whether single or double, is no doubt available, but I haven't got it. And I hear you saying that until you have got it, you're not going to take any risks at all. But for the record, I will be doing. It's coming up to 10:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So long COVID has more than 200 symptoms that affect 10 organ systems. This is the biggest international study so far. So British health experts now calling for a nationwide screening programme to help to identify the condition in people who may be suffering in silence. I'll run you through those. I'm no doctor. I hope that doesn't come as a surprise to anybody listening to the programme. But an awful lot of people, I suspect, have been noticing niggles and wondering, because the first thing you wonder, whether you've got a cough or whether you've got an earache, the first thing you wonder is, I wonder if that's COVID associated or linked. So I'll run you through what they think are the 10 organ systems and the symptoms affecting each in terms of long COVID, just after these words. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, although right now I want you to listen to Professor Chris Whitty, or at least me reading out his words, because he was taking part in an online seminar last night. I tweeted a link to it, actually. I wonder if any of you took up the opportunity to get online, hosted by the Science Museum. And, I mean, these are his words. I don't think we should underestimate the fact that we could get into trouble again surprisingly fast. I think saying the numbers in hospital are low now does not mean the numbers will be low in hospital in 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks' time. They could actually be really quite serious. And in terms of numbers, 50,000 new cases almost on Thursday. That's the highest daily number since January. More than 500,000 self-isolation alerts, or pings, as we prefer to call them, sent to people using the app in England and Wales alone during the first week of July. That's up 46% on the previous week. You heard on Nick's show this morning of meat processors warning that there will be product shortages due to staff absences. That presumably another sector already hit by the B word, now being hit by the P word. And the RMT trade union, which represents rail workers, said the number of stay-at-home workers will rise further on Monday due to confusing messages on masks and restrictions in England in particular. So, you know, there it is. What's the plan? 0345 6060 973. I remarkably tin-eared, I felt, talking on the breakfast show. The Solicitor General, Lucy Fraser, has also said or confirmed that this is not irreversible. The whole point of the last postponement was to make sure that the lifting would be irreversible. But here she is. Of course, if we get into a situation where it is unacceptable, i.e. the rise in infections and consequences, and we do need to put back further restrictions, then that, of course, is something the government will look at. You know, we stopped, I don't know why, some of the phrases that punctuated this programme with unerring regularity for several months last year and at the beginning of this one, for some reason, I presume just fatigue, mine, not yours. If I'm getting bored of hearing me say some things, then God knows how you're feeling about it. But, you know, the idea that just because they muffed everything up yesterday doesn't mean they'll muff everything up today. I think we all got a bit vaccine happy, didn't we? We all got a bit high on our own supply of vaccines, and we allowed it to take the edge off the more clear-eyed commentary that we've come to expect from each other. Well, it's back now, partly perhaps because the vaccine rollout is in abeyance, is slowing down, and the hesitancy that we've discussed a couple of times this week is becoming an even greater problem. But those phrases like clarity and leadership, where is it? Just because they muffed everything up yesterday doesn't mean they'll muff everything up today. It's back in play, isn't it? It's absolutely at the heart of all of this, because whether you're thinking about July the 4th or VE Day or even the catastrophe at Christmas, every single time he has the opportunity to urge caution rather than irresponsible celebration, he picks irresponsible celebration. And here we are again, with a ludicrous phrase like Freedom Day already injected into the veins of the public, despite the fact that we've just seen the highest number of new infections in a day since January, which was, of course, itself a direct consequence of the catastrophic messaging surrounding Christmas. It is incredible, isn't it? I mean, genuinely incredible. What is going on? And as things get worse than they've ever been before, by some measures, even with the vaccinations in place, the decision that they're sticking to at the moment is to lift the lid on absolutely everything and to rely upon personal responsibility while not giving us, as our caller Effa highlighted quite beautifully, I felt, not giving us the information that we need to make an informed decision. You can't make an informed decision without information, which is, of course, the point at which I allow myself to say the word Brexit. You can't make an informed decision if you've got dodgy information, as the fishermen and the farmers and pretty much every sector in the country, probably except bailiffs, is now beginning to find out. 10:54 is the time. Gerard is in Swansea. Gerard, what is going on?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
Big fan. First time calling, all that.
Well, and all that.
Yeah, I was saying to your colleague earlier on that the first duty of any government in any part of the world is the safety of the people. And as the scientists already told us, we're already in a third wave. So Johnson sat down with his advisors, and he can't take ownership of it because even his followers might balk at a third wave when it kicks off properly. Not if, when.
Yeah.
So what Boris has done, he's just basically abdicated responsibility completely. He's done a Pontius Pilate. He's walked away. So when it all goes pear-shaped, he can point a finger at Andy Burnham or Mayor Khan or the other regional leaders, not of his party, probably. and he'll say, well, you didn't exercise common sense, it's not my fault. And his followers will nod along and go along with it.
Do you think? I mean, we've heard this. I mean, it may become true eventually, but he's kind of not done that so far, has he? When he's had to backtrack, when he's had to postpone. I think we're pretty clear that the Johnson variant or the Indian variant or the Delta variant, whatever you prefer to call it, is in play here. And he's not going to be able to blame that on anyone except himself, I don't think.
Well,
it won't stop him trying, though. It won't stop him
James.
trying. It won't stop him trying, will it? Necessarily.
His followers believe him to be infallible. I mean, I've met some of his followers. I used to argue with them. I like a good argument. I'm on just about to finish your second book. I like a good row. But his followers will nod along. He'll blame the regional leaders like Mayor Khan, and I mentioned who's the other one, Andy Burnham. He'll blame anyone he can, other than saying he can't take ownership of it, because even his followers would perhaps raise an eyebrow when the hospitals start filling up again.
Yeah, well, they are filling up again. I mean, this is another thing that Chris Whitty was saying last night. Or not filling up, but the numbers are skyrocketing in terms of, I think, a doubling in 3 weeks.
Well, Boris him and his cabinet have just stepped back. They made a complete pig's ear of wave 1 and wave 2. There's no reason to expect them not to make the same mess of things in wave 3, and here we are.
And it is perhaps increasingly pointless chronicling it. I mean, or not pointless, but dispiriting chronicling it. I turn up every day, I speak to people like you, looking for some sort of light, looking for some sort of, chink in the armour of our fear and our analysis, and there isn't really any. There isn't one. Oh dear, you think we've got it tough. Imagine what it would be like being Professor Sarah Gilbert or Dr. Catherine Green, the two scientists who respectively came up with the vaccine and successfully produced it on a grand scale. They're my guests this week on the Full Disclosure podcast, which is bouncing back after a brief hiatus. And they've written a book called Vaxxers, which not only tells the incredible story of their work and research, but also addresses some of the misinformation and myths surrounding vaccines that are doing so much harm to the potential for herd immunity. And one came up on the programme yesterday about the reported use of embryos in the creation of vaccines. It is one of the things that they address directly in the book and indeed in the interview. Here's Dr. Catherine Green.
The name of the cell line is HEC293, human embryonic kidney 293. Well, that's right. It was derived more than 50 years ago. So the idea that is then promulgated that it's a new, that harm is being done to embryos now is clearly not true. But there's a, like you say, a nugget, a kernel on which that is founded. And I mean, people have the right to know that.
Yes.
It would not be appropriate to not tell the truth of that derivation, because that would be dishonest and incorrect. And people have the right to make their own decisions about that provenance. But they also have the right to know the truth and not some version of the truth, which is perhaps somebody else's agenda.
There it is. And so that nugget, that kernel of truth upon which all the nonsense is built is this. So over 50 years ago, in a laboratory, some cells were taken from the kidney of a fetus, and ever since then, those original cells have been promulgated or reproduced and form the basis of many, many, many vaccines. It's got absolutely nothing to do with aborted fetuses in the context of what is put into your arms. And yet that is one of the big things we hear whenever we open up the phone lines to vaccine hesitancy or vaccine skepticism. And that's just one of the things they address in the book and that we talk about in the interview. It's one of the most important, probably the most important interview I've ever done, because we are now reaching a state of urgency, both nationally and internationally. Professor Gilbert in particular, incredibly strong upon the importance of now spreading out the vaccines to the whole world. The notion of looking after ourselves and not looking after others is something that clearly makes her hair stand on end. But it's also a riveting listen because of the thriller element of it. There's one point when she's coming back from France, I think it's Catherine, Dr. Green, coming back from France on a train and watching the statistics and thinking, oh my God, I've got to get into the laboratory, like a real sense of jeopardy. And I hope, if you download it, that you'll both learn a lot of stuff that you can take into conversations with people who are still wavering on vaccinations, and also be stuck to your headphones or stuck to your speaker for the duration, because it is such an absolutely rollicking tale, which of course is still unfolding. So I'll just run through this because it is obviously a story that assumes ever more importance as this world-beating infection rate continues to climb. Long COVID has more than 200 symptoms affecting 10 organ systems. This is the biggest international study of so-called long haulers so far. It's led by University College London. It's identified 203 symptoms affecting the organs, with 66 lasting up to 7 months. So I suppose there is light at the end of the tunnel. Here are the most common symptoms reported by almost 4,000 sufferers of long COVID. Fatigue, brain post-exertional malaise, which is where symptoms worsen after physical or mental exertion, and cognitive dysfunction, which is often called brain fog. Other symptoms include hallucinations, tremors, itchy skin, changes to the menstrual cycle, sexual dysfunction, heart palpitations, bladder control issues, shingles, memory loss, blurred vision, diarrhea, and tinnitus. And the research team all have had long COVID, are calling for clinical guidelines on assessing the condition to be significantly widened. So no criticism there, really. Certainly not of the NHS or of the academics, because it's still new. We don't hear the word novel anymore, but at the beginning of this nightmare, it was a novel coronavirus, which meant it was new, which means that the science is box fresh. And therefore, the advice changed. At the outset, masks were not considered to make much of a difference. But then we learnt more about so-called aerosols. I'm always slightly wary of saying that word on the radio, given what happened with that firework in Leicester Square last Sunday. But given that what we now know about aerosols, the advice on masks in particular evolved and changed as our understanding of the virus did. Still amazes me that simple observation is not yet simple enough to penetrate some craniums. But they want a national screening programme to be made accessible to anyone who thinks that they might have long COVID. And that is designed to address the number of long haulers who are suffering in silence. So about 2 million adults in England are estimated to have had symptoms lasting for more than 12 weeks, roughly double the previous estimates. And I suspect that number is going to grow as well, which is another factor in the question I've been asking you this morning about what's going to happen on Monday. Probably not something you'd ring in with immediately. We will begin to see a huge rise in the number of people with long COVID. And, of course, we will see a huge rise in the risk of incubating a new variant of the virus. The more people get the virus, right, the more likelihood there is of the virus mutating into something that's resistant to the vaccines. That's just really night following day. It doesn't ever guarantee that a new virus will emerge, a new variant of the virus will emerge, but your chances of it emerging increase with every new infection. It's that simple. As it leaps from body to body, it can change. And the more it leaps from one body to another body, the more opportunities there are for the base virus to change. And the more opportunities there are for the base virus to change, the more likely it becomes that a variant emerges that will be resistant to the vaccines that we currently have. If you're thinking, blimey, James actually knows what he's talking about on this occasion, then do download the Full Disclosure podcast with Professor Sarah Gilbert and Associate Professor Catherine Green, who respectively invented the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Got my V's mixed up. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and in Catherine's case, put it into production on a scale that allowed us to get such an epic start on vaccinating the population. It really is one of the things I'm proudest of. In the current, don't say context, situation, it's almost essential listening, I would suggest. And you can find it wherever you download your podcasts. I recommend the Global app. 8 minutes after 11 is the time. We'll take a few more calls on what the flip is going on, but also on what we expect to happen, or indeed what the plan is, come Monday, when these three phenomena collide. Graham's in Leeds. Graham, what do you think?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
Couple of points to make. With regard to Monday, I think it's unbelievable that we're actually going to be doing what we're going to be doing. None of it makes any sense whatsoever.
Well, did you hear Alex? Did you hear Alex up in Cumbria? So
I did.
The idea is, the plan is that everybody who hasn't been vaccinated, or pretty much everybody, gets it, and therefore antibodies build up a resistance, and we achieve herd immunity through a combination of vaccination for half of the population and possibly infection for the other half.
Understood.
Including all our children.
That's correct. That was what leading on to one of the other points regarding the slowing down of the vaccine take-up. I myself am vaccine hesitant. I'm not jabbed at all. I've followed every other rule up until this point.
Right.
But I've decided to wait and see regarding the vaccine. And
will you promise me you'll listen to the podcast? Listen to Full Disclosure.
I do. I mean,
promise. Listen to the women that invented it and have put it into circulation, because I think it will address some of your concerns.
I promise you.
Thank you.
I mean, just with regard to the vaccine, just yesterday or the day before, the Australian Chief Medical Officer has said that the risks actually outweigh the benefits with the vaccine.
No, they haven't.
Now, I know that's a very controversial point.
They haven't said
but that's not me.
I haven't even checked, but there's no earthly way the Australian Chief Medical Officer has said, as explicitly as you describe it, that the vaccine has a greater risk than the virus. It just hasn't happened.
No, than the benefits to the vaccine.
Yeah.
But
it hasn't happened. I'm not even checking.
All that to one side.
All right.
Putting all that to one side, James.
Yes.
With regards to
Monday,
why he's actually doing it, my opinion is that the gravy train regarding the contracts for the PPE for friends and family.
Yes.
That gravy train has ended for the government. They are now looking for a new gravy train, in my opinion. Now, a couple of weeks, maybe a month ago, there was they planted a seed regarding all the operations that's outstanding on the NHS. I firmly believe at some point he will start inquiring regarding private companies to come in,
bringing them in to take up some of the slack. I mean, that's pure Chomsky, isn't it? That's Noam Chomsky saying what you do before you privatise is you run the nationalised institution down to its knees.
Mess it up as much as you can.
Yeah.
You mess the system up as much as you can, and at that point you have no choice but to request outside help.
I hear you.
And that will be the government's new gravy train, in my opinion.
Of course, a bill before Parliament or a bill in the Commons this week. I think making that prospect a little easier, a little more likely. Again, and at the beginning of this mess, I probably would have nodded a little more enthusiastically than I did when you said that, because you're positing the idea of a master plan. And albeit that he is fast becoming a victim of his own hard work in devaluing truth, what Dominic Cummings has made pretty clear is that there's never any plan. There's never any, even a sinister plan that is secretly unfolding before us. It is just a mess that they make up as they go along, and then only ever really act when they have absolutely no choice to do so. But that's hardly a comforting riposte to your analysis. Please listen to the podcast and read the book as well. It's a great book, Vaxxers, by Professor Sarah Gilbert and Dr. Catherine Green. It's weird to be plugging someone else's book on the programme. I don't like it at all. But duty calls. Sarah is in Wimborne in Dorset. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Nice
Hello.
to speak to you.
Likewise.
So I'm very worried about Monday in terms of people not being sensible. So I've had some thoughts on that with suffering from disabilities. I have contacted organisations to say what are their risk assessments, and I want to see them. I can get freedom of information if they won't give them to me.
Yes.
Under the Equality Act as well, that if you meet the disability side of that, you can be saying you want reasonable adjustments done for you. So I'm feeling that really every independent organisation can make their own decisions, or even if you're a bus driver, you can do your own risk assessment at that point and say, it would be hard for them.
It is the bit missing from the whole personal responsibility model, is the information that you need to make informed choices.
Well, that's right. The science are not following the science anymore. Chris Whitty's not doing his job. He's not following his code of conduct, is he?
I think that's a little unfair. Chris Whitty's job is to tell the government what they should do if they were prioritising health over everything else. And then Rishi Sunak comes in to tell roughly, this is my personal analysis to what the government should do if they were to prioritise the economy over everything else. And with a normal functioning Prime Minister, he would strike an intelligent balance somewhere between the two. But that, of course, is where the shopping trolley analogy that Dominic Cummings has introduced to the discourse becomes so terrifying, because it paints Boris Johnson as not having a single clue about how to plot a course between the sort of Scylla and Charybdis of health and wealth. And instead he just veers wildly, crashing into one rock and then spinning off and crashing into the other one. But I listen, I had a huge climb down on my cautious support for Matt Hancock earlier this year. I am still very much on the Chris Whitty page. I will defend Chris Whitty. I think he's doing an incredibly difficult job in incredibly difficult circumstances.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. I think so. I think he just, risk assessment, he would have trained in that. I think he just needs to say, it doesn't matter what the government, still just be clear what the science is at the moment, what he would recommend, even the government doesn't.
That's what he is. I mean, this is what he was doing last night at the Science Museum, but he can't do it at a government press conference. So, I mean, he is saying England, people should take things incredibly slowly. He's saying if you look over what people have done, what they intend to do now, they've been incredibly good at saying I may be a relatively low risk, but people around me are at high risk. I'm going to modify my behaviours. He does say that at the press conferences, actually.
See, I'm a nurse. I have looked at the BMJ.
Yes.
Look at the code of conduct. And I think really he's not really whistleblowing, which we are supposed to now, Not that
he's telling you what to do. The Johnson listen, you're a nurse. I feel a bit stupid now defending the chief medical officer against you, but he is telling us what he thinks we should do, even as Boris Johnson is announcing policies that he clearly doesn't believe are the right policies, but he doesn't have any role over policy making. All he is an advisor. So Johnson announces Freedom Day, folks, and Chris Whitty stands there and says, please be really careful. Carry on wearing your masks in crowded places. Carry on social distancing. Carry on exercising.
Not quite. He should be saying the science doesn't actually say that.
Okay. I think that's unspoken. I think that's the silent bit. Obviously, everything he says is built on the science. He doesn't need to keep reminding us.
I think it needs to be a bit more clear
fair
and
enough.
cynical.
No, fair enough.
For me.
Fair enough. But then he probably would get sidelined in the way that...
He'll get sacked. But then at least he was not, for me, that's his role,
I hear you. No, I hear you.
He works on the shop floor. I know he's a good man.
Yes.
But I just think he needs a bit more... to be a bit clearer.
Okay.
He's in the middle of it. He's probably very stressed. So I do get it, as well. So...
Yes, I hear you. We'll agree to mildly and politely and amicably disagree. But you make a point. At what point would Chris Whitty? He may feel the moment's passed. For me, Barnard Castle was a big problem for the medical advisors, who clearly felt that Dominic Cummings had behaved absolutely atrociously, appallingly. But obviously, staying in the tent was more important to them than calling out Dominic Cummings. And in retrospect, I would probably defend that decision as well, because we all want headlines and bonfires, but actually these are scientists. Valence and Whitty are a scientist and a doctor, and they are there to try to push the Prime Minister down a certain path, and they can't do that if they resign. Just a quick quote from Professor Paul Kelly, who is the Chief Medical Officer in Australia, after that earlier caller. This is a verbatim quote from his latest pronouncements. Stay at home, get tested, and book in for a vaccination. All right, just in case anybody might have felt that the lad up in Leeds was speaking anything other than accidental twaddle. But that's the risk, isn't it? That's what happens when misinformation gets out there, and that's why I really do recommend that you listen to this week's podcast. Full disclosure. Well, 10 more minutes on this, and then I am drawn to the tale of dawn raids. Actually, I haven't checked what time they occurred, but dawn raids sounds sexier, doesn't it? On Matt Hancock's suspected whistleblowers. 2 houses raided in an investigation into how that footage of him... I heard Theo Usherwood using the phrase steamy clinch earlier on Nick's show. Steamy clinch. I'm a huge fan. I never know whether or not this enthusiasm translates beyond people who've worked in newspapers, but phrases and words that you only ever hear in tabloid reports. They never pop up anywhere else in normal discourse. I think steamy clinch. I don't know whether Theo goes home at the end of a hard week being LBC's political editor and calls for a steamy clinch, but I doubt it. Similarly, romp. Romp is probably the best example of a word that you only ever see in red top newspapers. You never ever see it in the wild, so to speak. We used to make lists of these words in happier, calmer times. Steamy clinch. But computers and phones have been seized in a shock swoop over the Hancock CCTV story. And I, as you know, am increasingly drawn as I get older and mellower to questions I don't really immediately have a strong answer to. I don't know quite what to think about this at the moment. It seems to me both reasonable to investigate how somebody in the very heart of power could have been so compromised, but at the same time, I can make a fairly strong case for it being a complete waste of time, not least because the whistle that was blown was so clearly blown in the public interest. The Secretary of State for Health, who bears responsibility, personal and professional responsibility for coronavirus guidelines that the entire country is expected to follow, evidence of him breaking them is almost the definition of public interest. And by that I mean public interest in the sort of legal and philosophical sense, as opposed to simply stuff what the public is interested in, which is a very different kettle of fish altogether. So I think we'll get stuck into what you think about that as well. And although obviously it's built with bricks containing coronavirus coverage, it's a story that you could be discussing in entirely different circumstances that had nothing to do with the virus. And I increasingly feel the need to have conversations that are sort of either largely or entirely COVID-free at the moment for our own collective sanity, if nothing else. But as I say, a few more minutes on the question of Monday. Monday. What's going to happen? And if you are in the mood, what's the plan? What are they hoping will happen? What are they expecting to happen? None of it very pretty, actually, I think it's fair to say. Helen's in Dudley. Helen, what do you reckon?
Hello.
Hello, Helen.
Well, hello, James. I've just had an urgent email from my son's school saying that they are closing because 19 schools in the area, secondary schools in the area, have closed due to increased COVID rate, and they don't want it to happen to them.
So they're just shutting up early. When are they due to break up anyway?
Wednesday.
Okay.
They're doing some online lessons for
and there it is.
Certain students, but they're closing the school.
Do you remember at the end of the Christmas term, didn't Gavin Williamson threaten to sue a council for shutting up a bit early because they were worried about precisely the scenario you describe?
I'd forgotten.
Yeah, he did, though. I'm sure of it. We did it on the show. I mean, I said Groundhog Day an hour and a half ago. I'm going to have to say it again. Yeah. It's nuts, isn't it?
It's terrifying. I'm vulnerable. My husband's vulnerable. Our youngest is at a different school.
Right. Oh, gosh.
I'm having to find a way of getting food delivered because I can't get out and get it, and my husband's away this coming week and part of the following one. Our eldest is at University of Glasgow, and she got caught up in all of that.
Okay. In
October, she didn't have COVID, but one of her flatmates did, so she was trapped for a fortnight. And that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as that lockdown is concerned, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. They were brilliant. The university was brilliant. They gave them 10% reduction.
You can say what you want on this show. It's not GBBs.
No. I'll get. It's not you.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's permission. They got 2 bags of food each, which the students had left over, so they gave it to the food bank. They got £50 to spend on takeout to have delivered. You know, the University of Glasgow was brilliant. You can't ask for more. But this I am terrified about.
Coming around again. I mean, I acknowledge your fear, and I certainly wouldn't challenge you on the way that you feel, because it's built upon your medical situations. But we all, I think, recognise that something's got to give, don't we? It just feels that it's perhaps unwise for everything to give on Monday, or would you? I mean, we can't carry on like this forever, can we?
No, but people learn to modify their behaviours when smoking in enclosed spaces was made illegal. Why can't we learn to modify our behaviours in relation to COVID? I mean, I've got people literally laughing in my face, maskless, going, it's funny you're wearing a mask and trying to get 2 metres from me.
Oh, Helen, I'm sorry to hear that.
It's terrifying. Sorry. sorry.
No, you don't need to apologise to me. You know, it's your reality. It's what you're experiencing, and these idiots who are making everything worse than it needs to be. I guess what I was saying is that it's bad enough, but of course these people are making things deliberately worse, and some of them are sort of, you know, passing the hat around on the internet, asking for money to continue their crusade.
Well, when I was young, Dad was a surgeon, and we asked him what his biggest fear in medicine was. What was the worst thing he could possibly imagine facing? Yeah. And he said pandemic, and we was like,
what's that then?
Pandemic. It's the 80s. What are you talking about? Why is that worrying? And he didn't go into any more detail, and that was mealtime conversation changed.
No, of course, because it's old Dad talking old nonsense that none of us really understand. And I want my Finder's crispy pancakes, please. I don't want to be talking about.
Oh no, Mum never cooked those.
Right, I want you to. I've made you laugh. I've made you laugh. That's mission number 1 accomplished. And now I want you to listen to me briefly, if you would. It's not going to be. I mean, you can batten down the hatches again. You know you can. I know it's a worry that the youngest is going to be in school for a couple more days, but it's only a couple more days. You can get the food delivered. It's not like getting a man on the moon. It's easier to get food delivered now than it has been at any point in our lives. I'll make a note to them not to send you any Finder's crispy pancakes, but you can do this, Helen. You can do this. You can get through this. I promise you.
It's not that I can't do it. It's that I'm having to do it again.
I get that, and I've got that covered, all right? I'm not going to let up pointing out what's going on. All you've got to worry about is looking after you and yours, all right? You leave the rest of it to me, okay?
Okay, boss.
All right, Helen. Mind how you go.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, and stay safe. I promise you, it feels like, oh my God, here we go again, strapping on the guns and going back out into battle. But you've done it before, and you'll do it again. I promise you that. I promise you. It's the black country grit that we both have a bit of. 28 minutes after 11 is the time. John's in Alicante. John, what's the score?
Hi.
Hello.
First time I've rang any radio station, James. But
well, I'm on. Let me pop your cherry then, John.
I don't think on Monday this so-called Freedom Day in the UK or in England. There's not going to be an explosion on Monday. It will be a couple of weeks later.
Right.
So when Sajid Javid says, OK, we're expecting in August 50,000 to 100,000 cases a day, already there's 50,000 a day.
That's true, isn't it? Yes.
It looks like it's certain to be 100,000, and it doesn't take a great mathematician to work out that, OK, a couple of percent, 2% of people hospitalised.
And
that's
the bigger the number, of course it is.
Of course, if it's 100,000, that means 2,000 a day going into hospitals, 14,000 people a week.
Yeah. This is what Whitty was warning. Whitty was warning about this last night. If it's doubling over 3 weeks, then that 3-week window is going to narrow, isn't it? The more the numbers,
of course,
increase. Oh, lordy.
Well, in Spain, 2 or 3 weeks ago, they eased up. You still have to wear masks in shops and supermarkets, etc. But you didn't have to wear masks in the streets if you kept 2 meters apart.
Makes sense, I think.
So, and they open up restaurants and bars, increase the hours so they could open up till 2 o'clock.
Right.
Now, all that after 2 weeks of that freedom, everything has been reversed again.
They have they? Because we lose track, John. So they've literally gone backwards.
They've gone backwards and talking about bringing in curfews. They opened up nightclubs. Those have now shut down. Casinos, nightclubs, everything.
So, like as in Holland, as in Holland, where they did 3 weeks ago, roughly exactly what we're planning to do on Monday, and then apologised for it at the beginning of this week. And Spain is currently, I don't know where Spain is actually on the new cases.
Spain is the second worst number of cases in Europe, behind the UK.
Behind world-beating Brexit Britain.
We're now up to 43,000 a day.
That's right, I know. Well, actually, I hate to break it to you, that was yesterday. We're up to 48,500 now. We're going to hit 50,000, presumably, over the course of the weekend. But, John, we all hope not. It's something on which we can all agree. It's that weird 18-month-old psychic phenomenon that we're all suffering from, where I've never in my life wanted so much to be wrong about everything. And yet every morning we wake up and we think, oh, God, we're right again.